My husband thinks I can't speak right now. He doesn't know I heard him coaching my identical twin sister on how to act exactly like me so they can steal my life. The human throat is a fragile thing. A fraction of an inch of bruised tissue, a swollen laryngeal nerve from a severe steering wheel impact, and suddenly you are completely cut off from the world. For the past 12 days, my world had been reduced to the steady, rhythmic hiss of a hospital humidifier and the squeak of nurses' thick-soled shoes on linoleum. The vocal cords are intact. Mrs. Vance, but the trauma has caused severe vocal fold paralysis, the specialist had written on a small whiteboard on day 2. It is temporary. A matter of weeks, perhaps a month. You must absolute rest the voice. No straining, no whispering. I had nodded, accepting the silence. At first, it felt like a curse. I was a woman used to commanding rooms. I ran a high-end interior design firm with a clientele that required constant, assertive communication. Being trapped behind my own teeth was frustrating. But by day 10, the silence stopped being a prison. It became a listening post. My husband, Julian, was a portrait of the grieving, devoted partner. He spent hours by my bedside, smoothing my hair, holding my hand, and gently wiping the tears from my cheeks when the frustration of my condition overwhelmed me. He handled the insurance, he talked to the doctors, and he brought me fresh lilies every single morning. And then there was Sarah, my identical twin sister. Sarah and I shared the exact same DNA, the same sharp jawline, the same hazel eyes, and the same dark honey-toned hair. But that's where the similarities ended. While I had spent my 20s working 80-hour weeks to build a stable life and a multi-million-dollar business, Sarah had drifted through life on a cloud of resentment, bad investments, and failed relationships. She envied everything I had, my career, my financial security, and most of all, Julian. On Thursday evening, Julian told the night nurse that he was taking Sarah down to the hospital cafeteria to grab a coffee and help her process the emotional weight of my accident. They had been gone for nearly an hour. The room was dim, the only illumination coming from the amber streetlights outside the window. I needed to use the restroom, but the IV pole was awkward to move by myself. I pulled myself up slowly, the dull ache in my ribs reminding me of the car crash, and unhooked the brake on the rolling stand. As I approached the heavy wooden door of my private room, I heard footsteps halting right outside in the recessed alcove, a small architectural nook designed to keep the hallway noise down. I reached for the handle, but stopped when I heard Julian's voice. It wasn't his soft, comforting bedside voice. It was sharp, cold, and dripping with an intense, calculated urgency. "You're leaning too much to the left when you sit, Sarah," Julian whispered harshly. "Maya never does that. She has military-grade posture, shoulders back, chin up. If you sit like a sack of flour at the dinner table tomorrow, her business partner will notice within 5 minutes." "I'm trying, Julian," Sarah's voice hissed back, tight with nerves. "But she's so rigid. It's hard to mimic someone who acts like a robot." "You don't have a choice," Julian snapped. "The temporary guardianship paperwork is already signed. The doctors believe she's completely incapacitated from a communication standpoint. The court gave us joint administration over her estate and her design firm's accounts until she recovers. We have exactly 3 weeks before her next neurological evaluation. If we don't transfer the primary liquid assets out of her corporate reserve before she gets her voice back, the whole thing falls apart." I stood frozen against the cold wood of the door, my hand hovering millimeters from the brass handle. My heart was beating so violently I was terrified they would hear it through the panel. "What about her signature?" Sarah asked. "The bank requires a physical signature verification for transfers over $500,000. I've spent the last 3 days tracing her signature from her old design blueprints," Julian said, a sickening touch of pride in his voice. "I've got the stroke down perfectly. I'll practice it with you tonight at the house. Once the final $3 million is moved into the shell account we set up in Delaware, we'll file the medical competency petition. We'll claim the accident caused permanent brain damage, move her to that long-term care facility upstate, and you will step into her life permanently. Nobody will question it. You're her twin. And then we can finally be together legally." Sarah's voice softened, turning into something disgusting and sycophantic. "No more hiding in cheap motels?" "Yes, my love," Julian murmured. I heard the faint rustle of clothing, the unmistakable sound of a quiet, passionate kiss right outside my door. "Just keep your mouth shut, do exactly what I tell you, and play the part." She's completely helpless. She can't say a damn word to stop us. They moved away, their footsteps fading down the corridor toward the elevators. I slid down the back of the door, my knees hitting the linoleum. The betrayal didn't break me. It set me on fire. My husband, my sister, they thought my silence was a weakness. They thought because I couldn't speak, I couldn't fight. They had no idea that the silent observer is the most dangerous person in the room. The next morning, Julian arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, carrying a fresh bouquet of lilies. He smiled warmly, leaning down to press a tender kiss to my forehead. I forced myself to remain completely still, letting my eyes flutter open like a docile, fragile patient. "Good morning, sweetheart," he murmured, pulling a chair close to the bed. "The doctors say your vitals are perfect today. Sarah is at the house right now, taking care of the bills and keeping things running smoothly at the office. She's been such a rock for us during this nightmare." I reached for the small dry erase marker and the whiteboard sitting on my bedside table. My fingers were steady as I wrote, "Thank her for me. I love you both." Julian's eyes softened with a look of profound victory. He truly believed he had won. He patted my hand. "I'll make sure she knows, darling. You just focus on resting that throat." As soon as Julian left 2 hours later to run errands for the firm, I pulled my personal smartphone out from the bottom of my hospital bag. Julian had checked my phone logs early on, but he had forgotten that I kept an old, secondary work phone, an identical model used for international international clients, hidden in the secret zipper compartment of my leather tote. I connected to the hospital's guest Wi-Fi through an encrypted browser. I needed to see what they had already touched. I logged into my private business portal for my advanced designs. My stomach tightened as I saw a red notification banner at the top of the screen. Notice of temporary guardianship registry. Added Julian had already filed the emergency court order using the medical certificate from my first day in the ICU. He and Sarah now had legal access to my business accounts as co-administrators, but they hadn't moved the big money yet. The corporate reserve account containing $3.2 million from our recent luxury hotel contract was still intact. They were waiting for Sarah to perfect her performance before they walked into the private banking branch to execute the withdrawal. I needed help, but I couldn't call anyone. If I texted my business partner or my attorney from this number, Julian might see a notification on our shared family cloud data loop. I had to go completely dark. I pulled up a secure messaging app and sent a single text to Arthur Pendleton, a retired corporate investigator who had helped my firm handle a massive embezzlement case with a rogue contractor 3 years ago. He was old school, completely independent, and owed me a massive professional favor. Arthur, this is Maya. I cannot speak due to a medical condition. My husband and twin sister are attempting to steal my identity and my estate using an emergency guardianship order. They are practicing my signature and my behavior. I am being discharged tomorrow. I need you to meet me at the hotel across from my house at midnight. Do not contact Julian. 5 minutes passed. The ... of a typing indicator appeared. I'm on it, kiddo. Don't sign anything, don't look them in the eye, and play dumb. I'll see you at midnight. The next afternoon, the discharge paperwork was finalized. Julian brought a wheelchair to my room, helping me gently into the passenger seat of his luxury SUV. He chattered amiably the entire drive home, talking about the renovations he wanted to do to our garden, acting like the perfect, supportive spouse. When we pulled up to our beautiful mid-century modern home in the hills, Sarah was standing on the porch. She was wearing one of my favorite cream silk blouses, and her hair was pinned back in the exact low bun I wore every single day. As I walked into the house, Sarah rushed forward, her eyes brimming with theatrical tears. "Oh, Maya, thank God you're home." She hugged me. Her perfume was strong. It was my signature scent, a rare French botanical blend I imported. She had gone into my dressing room, taken my clothes, and sprayed my perfume on her skin. She was literally trying on my life like a coat. I pulled back, giving her a slow, weak nod, and used my finger to trace a simple thank you in the air. "She's tired, Sarah," Julian said, placing a protective hand on my waist. "Let's get her settled in the guest room downstairs. The stairs to the master suite might be too much for her ribs right now." The guest room. They were already displacing me from my own bed so Sarah could sleep there. "Of course," Sarah said, stepping aside with a submissive, helpful smile. I let them lead me down to the small, isolated guest room at the back of the house. Julian tucked me into bed, kissing my cheek before turning off the lights. "Get some sleep, honey. We're right upstairs if you need anything." I lay in the dark, listening to the heavy oak door click shut. The house went quiet for 20 minutes before I heard the faint, rhythmic creaking of the floorboards directly above my head. The master bedroom. My husband and my sister were upstairs together, celebrating my return by sharing my bed. I waited until the clock on the nightstand read 11:45 p.m. I slipped out of the covers, wearing a dark, oversized hoodie and leggings. I left my shoes off until I reached the side patio doors, sliding them open with a practiced silence I had learned as a teenager. I slipped out into the midnight mist, running down the dark driveway toward the main road. I was going to meet my army. Arthur Pendleton was waiting for me in a corner booth of the dimly lit diner attached to the boutique hotel 2 blocks away. He had a laptop open, a stack of folders, and a large mug of black coffee. He looked up as I slid into the booth, his sharp investigator eyes scanning my face. "You look like a ghost, Maya," he said softly, pushing a small digital tablet toward me. "Don't try to talk. Type it out here." I grabbed the tablet, my fingers flying across the virtual keyboard. "They are moving the money within the next week. Julian is forging my signature. Sarah is wearing my clothes, my perfume, and practicing my posture. They plan to commit me to an upstate facility permanently once the funds clear." Arthur stared at the text, his jaw hardening. He pulled a physical document from his folder and laid it on the table. I did a deep dive into Julian's personal accounts over the last 48 hours. He's completely broke, Maya. His commercial real estate firm is a hollow shell. He owes nearly $2 million to private creditors. If he doesn't get his hands on your corporate reserve by the end of the month, his suppliers are going to file for involuntary bankruptcy against him. I typed. That's why he's rushing. He needs my contract money to save himself. Exactly. Arthur nodded. And your sister Sarah filed for bankruptcy in Nevada 6 months ago. They are 2 drowning rats trying to climb onto your island. But here's the thing. Because they have that temporary guardianship order, any standard legal challenge you file right now will take weeks to get a hearing. Julian's lawyers will claim you are being paranoid due to the accident's trauma. We need something undeniable. We need to catch them committing the fraud on camera, with full audio confession. I paused, thinking about my house. It was a historic home, but I had recently upgraded the security infrastructure during our renovation last year. I typed, "The house has a built-in nanny cam system hidden in the antique grandfather clock in the living room and the bookcase in the master bedroom. I turned it off 6 months ago when the housekeeper left. The local recording server is still in the basement." Arthur's eyes lit up. "Can you turn it back on without them knowing?" "Yes. The server operates on a separate, hardwired local network loop. If I connect a wireless bridge router to the main switch in the basement, I can control the cameras and monitor the live audio feed directly from this phone. Do it tonight, Arthur commanded, leaning forward. Tomorrow is Friday. Julian's bank contact is a private wealth manager at the downtown branch, a guy named Marcus who has taken kickbacks from Julian in the past. My guess is they will try to execute the signature verification and the wire transfer on Monday morning when the markets open. We have 48 hours to let them record their own execution. I nodded, a cold, ruthless satisfaction settling deep into my chest. I slipped back into my house at 1:15 a.m., completely undetected. I crept down to the basement, using the flashlight on my phone to find the dusty gray security server rack hidden behind the storage shelves. My hands were steady as I plugged the small wireless bridge router Arthur had given me into the secondary Ethernet port. The server whined quietly, a row of green lights blinking to life. I pulled up the custom camera app on my hidden work phone. The screen flickered, revealing 2 live video panels. The first panel showed the dark, empty living room. The second panel showed the master bedroom upstairs. The infrared night vision lens was active. On the screen, my husband Julian was fast asleep, his arm thrown over my identical twin sister Sarah, who was curled up against his chest in my favorite silk pajamas. I zoomed in on Sarah's face. She looked so much like me it was terrifying. But as I watched her sleep, I realized something important. She was just an imitation, a cheap copy trying to play a role she hadn't earned. I tapped the record button on my phone, saving the stream to a secure, encrypted cloud server. Enjoy my bed while you can. Sarah, I thought, the words echoing silently in my mind, because on Monday, you're going to be sleeping in a cell. Saturday and Sunday were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I spent the days sitting in the guest room armchair, wrapped in a blanket, pretending to stare blankly out the window. Every few hours, Julian or Sarah would come in to check on me, offering me tea or a superficial pat on the shoulder. To them, I was a broken tool, a compliance mechanism waiting to be discarded. Through my hidden phone, I watched their entire weekend play out on the camera feeds. They spent hours at the dining room table. Julian had spread out dozens of my old design contracts, using a light box to trace my complex, angular signature over and over onto blank sheets of paper. No, Sarah, look at the loop on the M. Julian's voice boomed through my phone's earpiece as I sat downstairs in the dark. Maya doesn't hesitate at the apex. She snaps it down fast. Try it again. Sarah let out a frustrated groan, slamming her pen onto the table. Julian, my hand hurts. We've been doing this for 4 hours. The banker won't look at it under a microscope. Marcus will look at it exactly as much as I tell him to, Julian hissed, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look at him. But if the compliance department flags it for an audit, we are done. We need this $3 million, Sarah. My creditors called again this morning. They are threatening to come to the office on Tuesday. Sarah softened, leaning into his touch. Okay, let me try it again. Show me the walk one more time. Julian stood up, walking across the living room line of sight. When you walk into the private lounge, you don't look at the reception staff. Maya treats people below her tax bracket like furniture. You walk straight to Marcus's desk, you sit down, you give him a sharp, brief nod, and you say nothing. Remember, you're supposed to be straining your voice. If you have to say something, use the raspy whisper we practiced. Got it, Sarah murmured, picking up the pen. I recorded every single second of it. The coaching, the forgery practice, the explicit discussions of the siphoned millions, and the detailed plan to have me declared permanently incompetent by a corrupt doctor Julian had been paying off under the table. On Sunday night, Julian came down to the guest room alone. He sat on the edge of my bed, his face a mask of profound sorrow. Maya, honey, he said smoothly, running a thumb over my jawline. The doctors called today. They think it would be best for your recovery if we moved you to a specialized clinic upstate on Tuesday morning. They have the best throat specialists in the country there. It's a quiet, beautiful place. You'll be able to heal without any stress. I looked into his eyes, the eyes of the man I had loved for 7 years, the man I had supported when his first business failed, the man I had trusted with my soul. There was nothing inside him but emptiness and greed. I picked up the whiteboard, my hand perfectly stable, and wrote, "Whatever you think is best, Julian, I trust you." Julian smiled, a look of pure, patronizing relief washing over his face. He leaned down and kissed my cheek. "I love you, sweetheart. Everything is going to be taken care of. I promise." "I know it will, Julian," I thought, my eyes locking onto his as he walked out of the room. "I know it will." Monday morning arrived with a crisp, biting chill. At 8:30 a.m., Julian and Sarah left the house in the SUV. Sarah was dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, the exact one I wore when I closed the luxury hotel contract last year. Her hair was immaculate, her posture rigid. She looked exactly like Maya Vance. I waited until their car cleared the gates before I stood up from my armchair. I threw off the blanket, walked over to the guest room mirror, and looked at myself. My throat was still tender, but the swelling had gone down significantly over the weekend. I opened my mouth, taking a deep, controlled breath from my diaphragm, and spoke my first words in 12 days. "My name is Maya Vance," I said. My voice was raspy, a bit gravelly, but it was clear, distinct, and entirely functional. I walked upstairs to my master dressing room, pulled a striking crimson blazer from the rack, a color I knew Sarah would never wear because she thought it made her look washed out, and did my hair in a sharp, elegant twist. Arthur Pendleton was waiting for me in his sedan outside. I jumped into the passenger seat, my hidden phone displaying the live location tracking of Julian's SUV through our shared vehicle network link. "They just parked at the First National Bank downtown," Arthur said, shifting the car into drive. "Marcus's private office is on the 3rd floor, reserved for high net worth clients. I've already sent the encrypted video logs to the district attorney's financial crimes unit. They have 2 detectives waiting in the lobby. Let them go up first, I said, my voice cutting through the car's interior like a razor. I want Sarah to sign that paper. I want the forgery complete before I walk in. We arrived at the towering glass skyscraper downtown 10 minutes later. I walked through the heavy revolving doors, my red blazer drawing looks from the corporate staff. The 2 detectives in plainclothes nodded to Arthur as we approached the secure elevators. We're tracking the wire initiation from the internal system, one of the detectives whispered. The moment the signature is scanned and uploaded, we move. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The private wealth management wing was silent, carpeted in thick, expensive wool, with mahogany doors separating the offices. Arthur and the detectives stayed in the waiting lounge while I walked down the corridor toward Marcus's private suite. The door had a frosted glass panel. Through the faint silhouette, I could see Julian standing by the window, his hands in his pockets, while Sarah was seated at the desk, leaning over a thick stack of corporate transfer documents. Marcus, a slick-looking man in a 3-piece suit, was watching her with a nervous smile. Sarah picked up the heavy gold pen, took a deep breath, and executed the forged signature across the final wire transfer authorization page. Perfect, Marcus said, taking the paper and sliding it into the digital desktop scanner. The $3.2 million will clear into the Delaware account within 5 minutes, Julian. Julian let out a loud, triumphant laugh, stepping forward to wrap his arms around Sarah's shoulders. We did it, baby. It's over. The company is ours. I reached out, grabbed the polished brass handle of the mahogany door, and pushed it open with a loud, deliberate click. I'm afraid there's been a slight administrative error, I said, my voice ringing out through the quiet office, entirely steady, cold, and loud. Julian and Sarah spun around as if they had been shot. Sarah's face went so pale she looked like she was about to faint. Julian's mouth opened, his eyes protruding with a look of absolute paralyzing horror. He looked at me, then at Sarah, then back to me, his brain completely short-circuiting as he tried to process the reality of 2 identical twins standing in the same room, one in charcoal and one in blazing crimson. Mamaya? Julian choked out, his voice cracking into a high-pitched squeak. You can't speak. I can speak perfectly fine, Julian, I said, walking into the room with slow, deliberate steps, my posture immaculate. In fact, I've been listening to every single word you've said for the last 4 days. Sarah scrambled backward in her chair, the gold pen clattering across the mahogany desk. Julian, she knows. Oh my God, she knows, she shrieked, her carefully practiced Maya posture completely disintegrating into panic. Marcus, cancel the wire, now, Julian screamed, lunging toward the desk computer. Don't touch that keyboard, Mr. Vance, Detective Miller's voice boomed from the doorway. The 2 plainclothes detectives stepped into the office, their badges displayed, followed by Arthur Pendleton, who was holding a tablet displaying the live encryption feed. Marcus threw his hands in the air, stepping away from the terminal immediately. I didn't know, officers, I swear. She had the ID, she had the guardianship papers. The guardianship papers were obtained through fraudulent medical misrepresentation, and the signature on that wire is a felony forgery, Detective Miller stated, pulling 2 pairs of steel handcuffs from her belt. Julian Vance, Sarah Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit grand larceny, bank fraud, and identity theft. Julian turned on Sarah instantly, his face twisted in a desperate, ugly mask of self-preservation. It was her. She wanted the money. She's been planning this for months. She hated her sister. You liar, Sarah screamed, lunging across the desk at him, her nails clawing at his face before one of the detectives grabbed her arms, pulling her back. You came to me. You told me your business was failing. You told me you loved me. Shut up. Just shut your mouth, Julian yelled as the heavy steel handcuffs clicked around his wrists. I stood perfectly still in the center of the room, watching them tear each other apart like wild dogs in a cage they had built for me. There was no sadness left in my heart, no grief for the marriage I had lost, or the sister who had betrayed me. All I felt was the clean, pristine weight of absolute justice. As the detectives led them past me down the corridor in front of the whispering bank staff, Sarah stopped, looking at me with swollen, tear-filled eyes. Maya, please, we're blood. You can't let them lock me away. I looked at her, at my own face, corrupted by years of envy and malice. Blood didn't stop you from trying to erase my life. Sarah, I said softly, my voice carrying the absolute finality of a judge's gavel. Enjoy the silence. 2 weeks later, the locks on my mid-century modern home had been completely replaced with high-security manual deadbolts. I had canceled the smart home camera network, wiped the local servers, and filed for an expedited divorce from Julian on the grounds of criminal fraud. My business partner and I had successfully secured our contract money, and Vance Digital Designs was currently expanding into a new downtown office suite. I stood on the patio of my quiet house, looking out over the Seattle skyline as the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across the hills. The silence around me wasn't a prison anymore. It was a clean slate. My phone buzzed in my hand, a text from Arthur Pendleton, letting me know the grand jury had officially returned true bills on all indictments for Julian and Sarah, with a trial date set for the fall. I locked my phone, slipped it into my pocket, and took a deep, clear breath of the cool evening air. My voice was fully recovered, my business was thriving, and my life was entirely my own. The copy had been purged, and the original was back in full control.